If you've ever watched Argentina's national soccer team play, or simply looked at the streets of Buenos Aires, you've probably noticed something unusual. Many Argentinians have blonde hair, blue eyes, and Italian or Spanish last names. That's a little surprising. After all, Argentina is in South America, a continent where countries like Brazil and Colombia have large populations of African descent. Yet, according to Argentina's most recent census, less than 1% of the population identifies as having African ancestry. So was Argentina always a country with almost no black population? Actually, it's the exact opposite. What many people don't realize is that over 200 years ago, people of African descent were a vital part of Argentine society. They lived in Buenos Aires, worked in the ports and on farms, served in the military, and helped build the nation from its earliest days. So, what happened? How did such a significant community nearly disappear from modern Argentina? Join J30 World Discovery as we uncover why Argentina has so few black people today. War wiped out an entire generation. The first major reason the Afro-Argentine population declined was war. In the early 19th century, Argentina fought for its independence from Spain. But even after gaining independence, the country spent decades caught up in civil wars and conflicts with neighboring nations. Every war needed one thing: soldiers. And those most often recruited were the poorest members of society, including large numbers of Afro-Argentine men. For some enslaved people, military service was even presented as a path to freedom, but that freedom came at a terrible cost. Many didn't just die in battle. They also succumbed to hunger, disease, and the horrific medical conditions of the time. Then came the Paraguayan War between 1864 and 1870, one of the deadliest conflicts in South American history. Thousands of Afro-Argentines once again served in the army and suffered devastating casualties. A popular claim online suggests that the Argentine government intentionally sent black soldiers to the front lines in order to eliminate the community. However, historians still debate that theory. What we do know is that Afro-Argentines served in disproportionately high numbers and suffered enormous losses. But there is no clear historical evidence proving the existence of a coordinated plan to wipe out the entire black population through warfare. Even so, after decades of nearly continuous conflict, the number of young Afro-Argentine men had fallen dramatically. And then, just as the wars were ending, another disaster struck. A deadly epidemic made things even worse. In 1871, Buenos Aires was hit by a devastating yellow fever epidemic. At the time, many Afro-Argentines lived in overcrowded, low-income neighborhoods with poor sanitation. Those conditions allowed the disease to spread rapidly. Within just a few months, thousands of people died, making it one of the worst public health disasters in Argentine history. There's no doubt that war followed by disease significantly reduced the Afro-Argentine population. But in my opinion, those two events alone still can't explain how a community that was once so visible eventually became less than 1% of the country's population. The biggest reason actually came from a decision made by the Argentine government, a decision that would completely reshape the country for the next century. One decision changed the country forever. By the late 19th century, Argentina faced an important question: how could it become a world power? At the time, many of the country's political leaders shared the same belief. If Argentina wanted to become wealthy and modern, it needed to follow Europe's example, not just economically, but socially as well. In fact, Argentina's 1853 constitution explicitly encouraged immigration from Europe. This wasn't just political rhetoric. The government invested heavily in railroads, expanded farmland, created jobs, and introduced policies designed to attract European settlers, and the results exceeded every expectation. But before we continue, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to J30 World Discovery. In just a few decades, Argentina's population was transformed. From around 1880 through the early 20th century, ships arrived one after another in Buenos Aires. Millions of immigrants left Italy, Spain, Germany, France, Poland, and many other European countries to start new lives in Argentina. Over the course of roughly 50 years, more than 6 million Europeans immigrated to the country. To put that into perspective, this was one of the largest immigration waves in the world relative to a country's population. At the time, Argentina itself only had a few million residents. Adding more than 6 million newcomers dramatically reshaped the nation's demographic makeup within just a generation or two. That's one reason why so many Argentinians today have Italian or Spanish last names. In fact, it's estimated that around 60% of Argentinians have at least some Italian ancestry, one of the highest percentages anywhere outside of Italy. That's also why Buenos Aires is often nicknamed the Paris of South America. But it wasn't just the population that changed. From the government's perspective, the policy was a success. By the early 20th century, Argentina had become one of the wealthiest countries in the world. At one point, its GDP per capita rivaled that of several Western European nations, but rapid growth also came with unintended consequences. As millions of Europeans settled in Argentina, communities that had been there for generations, including indigenous peoples and Afro-Argentines, became a much smaller share of the overall population. They didn't suddenly disappear. They simply became a minority in a country transformed by massive immigration. And then something else happened that caused Afro-Argentines to almost disappear from public awareness. They gradually stopped appearing in official population records. Even the census helped make them disappear. If you had asked many Argentinians several decades ago whether their country had a black community, a surprising number probably would have answered, no. Not because they were trying to deny history, but because for generations, Afro-Argentines had become almost invisible in everyday life. They were rarely mentioned in school textbooks. They appeared only occasionally in national history. And perhaps most importantly, for many decades, Argentina no longer included a separate category for people of African descent in its national census. That might sound like a minor bureaucratic change, but it had enormous consequences. When a community is no longer counted, no longer taught, and no longer included in the official story of a nation, within a few generations, many people begin to believe that community never really existed. Researchers often describe this as social invisibility. The people are still there, but society gradually stopped seeing them. They didn't vanish. They became part of Argentina. There's one final piece of the puzzle that many people overlook. As millions of Europeans settled in Argentina, many Afro-Argentines married people of Italian, Spanish, or other European backgrounds. Generation after generation, their descendants became increasingly diverse in appearance. Some had lighter skin. Others no longer displayed the physical traits that people typically associate with African ancestry. And when asked about their identity, many simply answered, "I'm Argentinian." Over time, countless families continued to carry African ancestry, but no longer identified themselves as Afro-Argentine. That's why many historians argue that Argentina's black population didn't completely disappear. Instead, much of it gradually blended into the broader population through generations of intermarriage and cultural assimilation. Were you surprised to learn that Argentina once had such a large Afro-descendant community? In your opinion, which factor had the biggest impact? War, immigration, or assimilation? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoy fascinating stories about geography, history, and little-known facts from around the world, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to J30 World Discovery.